What's going on, ladies and gentlemen? It's Michael here, and welcome back to another FudgeMuppet Fallout 4 build. Today's installment is a little bit of an odd duckling compared to our usual designs, a role-playing sorbet to cleanse the video game palate, if you will. Today's build is the one, the only, the Preacher. The Preacher is an individual that opts to see the good in people, despite that which may prevent such people from being outwardly good. Now, while the name Preacher may sound like some churchy do-gooder, which in many ways this character is, he's definitely still a badass when the time arises. He won't officially be affiliated with any specific church in the backstory or in his post-vault life, so he's not an official preacher in the traditional sense. Now, before we get into the backstory, allow me to explain how you'll be role-playing this character, what he's like as a person, and how he will act in the world you explore with him. We'll be touching on a little bit of the playstyle stuff too. This preacher travels with love, wisdom, and bullets. He will have a forgiving nature which stems from his faith in God, but it's also something that simply comes naturally to him, going beyond faith, existing as a sort of naive quality. This build does tend to place too much trust in people, believing that honesty is everyone's go-to way of life as much as it is his. That said, he's not too out of touch with humankind, and he's definitely found himself doing the wrong thing before. Over time in the Wasteland, he will also develop a keener eye for trouble. Now, despite how some may treat him, the Preacher remains kind-hearted, charitable, and always accepting of those who are not quite so far gone from their graces. He maintains a positive approach to those who sin and aids them on their path towards redemption. It's of no surprise that combat and the taking of lives proves to be an initial challenge to such a person, but he eventually comes to the understanding that some evil refuses to repent, refuses to be reasoned with, and is therefore required to face ultimate judgment by the Lord himself in the afterlife. The Preacher may prefer peace, but he is endowed with the wrath of the Lord when it comes to justice, and the Lord's justice is swift as it is punitive. Your playstyle itself will reflect as much, navigating the lands as a defensive person rather than offensive. It goes without saying that warmongering and unnecessary conflict will be a no-no. At the end of the day, the Preacher endeavors to rid the world of suffering, conflict, and sin, desperately forcing himself on a mission to salvage what he can in a world that doesn't take so kindly to saving. We said this build was an odd duckling, but to mix animal metaphors, this man of faith inhabiting a terrible land is truly a fish out of water. Regardless of whatever life throws at him, God seems to deliver him towards a brighter tomorrow. Some might say his survival can be accounted for by equal parts resilience and an uncanny lucky streak. So you can see where that'll go with the stats. Remember to use the timestamp links in the description to help you navigate throughout this video if that's something you want to do. Follow us on Snapchat and Twitter to honor Harambe, and obviously if you love role-playing character builds, Fallout, Elder Scrolls, or any of the above, including Harambe, subscribe for a whole lot more. Now let's get into the backstory. The Preacher grew up in a less than ideal neighborhood with a less than ideal dad. You know the type, the dad that was hitting the bottle when he wasn't hitting his wife or even his son. Crime was rampant, home life was tragic, and the future looked bleak. In times of need, people throughout history turned to a guiding star of hope, something that shone with promises of salvation. For the Preacher and his mother, that shining star was the Christian faith. With nothing more than the shirt on his back, the bruises on his face, the love of his mother, and a Bible under his pillow, the Preacher endured. Witnessing the bottom of humanity as what the majority of society pretended didn't exist would have turned a lesser man hateful, but not him. Instilled with the positive virtues of Christianity and the compassion in his heart, the Preacher sought out to leave the world a better place than when he entered it, keeping out of trouble, finding fellow believers, undertaking a ton of community work, and most importantly, remaining a beacon to others as the Lord was a beacon to him throughout all the darkness and despair. Although he never officially became affiliated with the church, he often spoke at the church during Mass and preached self-help and healthy mental behavior. When the war broke out, he was conscripted into the military, and sadly for him, it wasn't something he would do by choice. So, though he did not advocate war and violence, he was forced out of his current life and forced himself to rationalize it as defending those he cared about and other believers who came from where he did. He also knew there would be many soldiers he could offer guidance to. The war took an emotional toll on the Preacher, as it did to many others. The entire concept of taking a life had been so contrary to his life before that point in time that it left him feeling empty, even though he was praised honorably for his actions. He would later cross this personal threshold once more in order to survive the harsh post-vault world. The preacher returned stateside in time to accompany his mother while she lay grasping at the final straws of life. After all they'd been through together, the abuse, the heartache, the poverty, cancer had taken her. This would mark the preacher's lowest emotional point in his pre-vault adult life. His faith was being tested. He didn't know how to cope. So he turned to what he'd seen as a child, the bottle. The preacher saw the next 5 years of his life washed away amongst the filth of the gutters. It was after a week-long alcoholic binge, though, that pushed him to his physical limits that he awoke outside a town church. Before his very eyes stood the pastor's daughter, a glowing angel to pull him from where he fell. Over time, she would see him through sobriety, through mending his shattered heart, his shattered mind, and eventually even standing beside him by the altar, inside of God and all his mend. After mending that relationship too, that is. The two settled down, had a child, and for just a moment, the preacher was complete. When the bombs fell, they were all rushed to the vault. The preacher's trials and tribulations had just begun. The preacher emerges from the vault with less than he had begun with in life. No family, no love, and now even no environment. The one he had become accustomed to anyways. In this time of need, he will need his faith more than ever. Faith being all that he has left. As part of the role-playing, this build will never drink or take chems. The preacher will travel the lands in search of his son. It really doesn't get more biblical than this, a bit of reverse Jesus and God, if you will. For everyone who knows who Father is in Fallout 4, it makes the connection even stranger. As he did before the bombs fell and before the vault, the preacher will venture forth and help people where he can. Though it's not an absolute necessity, he will also show the way of the Lord to those who are open to it. As a rule of roleplay, as in life, try with all your might to leave a place you have been better off than it was when you arrived. The preacher will ultimately side with the railroad, believing that synths are also among the children of God and deserve a chance of salvation too. He won't like the Institute, as they literally play God, even if you find that ironic or contradictory. This character does not. You should also aid the Minutemen on the side in order to help them accomplish worthy and good deeds. That also fits in with the role-playing, as we'll discuss in the settlement section. With the Start Game special stats, you'll want to have 2 Strength, 1 Perception, 4 Endurance, 5 Charisma, 3 Intelligence, 4 Agility, and 9 Luck. The special book will be used on Agility, bringing it up to a 5. The Luck, which will simulate the grace of the Lord himself, will lead you into some very favorable scenarios, as well as plenty of critical hits for the entire family to share. The agility for VATS usage will complement the preacher's slick trigger finger, and as we know, faithful hands are steady hands. The intelligence stat will give us access to the gun nut perk and help us level up by understanding our new world at an acceptable pace. As a person of the people and for the people, the preacher's charisma is a given, which will be used to persuade, resolve, get the local leader perk for settlements, and generally ease tensions in relationships all round. Now let's talk perks. This build will be using a lot of luck perks and scoring strong critical hits left, right, and center. This is obviously executed through the use of Critical Banker, 4-Leaf Clover, Grim Reaper's Sprint, and better criticals. We've got super high luck and pretty good agility, so overall this build can really become a VATS powerhouse. Agility perks like Action Boy help this even more by giving the preacher a massive amount of AP regeneration. Combine this with the Rifleman perk to increase rifle damage and the Gun Nut perk to increase the damage of the rifle we're using, and you can see how this build dishes out dangerous amounts of damage precisely and perpetually throughout battle. Bloody Mess enhances this even more, and with 3 ranks it'll be adding 15% more damage, along with making bodies explode in all kinds of gory ways. Now, we actually wanted this extra gore for an artistic contrast between the preacher concept and the reality of what he has to do. He sees killing as an extremely violent thing, and we wanted to convey this in the game. More damage is also nice. The build has decent endurance, but his resistances are shit unless you give him the armor perk so he can ballistic weave his gear. This makes the build a lot sturdier, so get Ballistic Weave as soon as you get this perk. We do know that Endurance investment is better than Life Giver, but we got Life Giver because of the health regeneration, and we like to rationalize that this is due to the preacher's absolute belief that God is helping him. We also will benefit from more health too, which is nice, and it also has a Jesus symbol, so bonus points for that. We also have 2 perk points invested in Medic to make Stimpaks and Radaway much more effective, as you know, sometimes the Lord doesn't heal the preacher fast enough. Being someone who does like to spread the word of his religion, we've got the Local Leader perk. This is great for if you want basic settlement building setups, which we'll talk about towards the end of the video. We got the Mysterious Stranger perk to play into the idea that there's some mysterious force at work watching over the preacher, and what this does is of course cause the Mysterious Stranger to appear occasionally in VATS to lend a hand. Later towards level 50, when we get the Ricochet perk, it is rationalized by the preacher as his god looking out for him. Sometimes bullets deflect off him back at enemies. All kinds of lucky things happen to this character. Obviously the Fortune Finder perk is there too to help with getting caps to make things quicker to afford, and this plays into the whole idea of being really lucky even more. Not including gear, but including bobbleheads, the preacher should end up with 3 strength, 2 perception, 5 endurance, 6 charisma, 4 intelligence, 6 agility, and 10 luck. Gear will help though, which brings me to the next section. Get your mitts on the passer's vestments, which you will want to ballistic weave for highly needed powerful resistances. They also give you +1 charisma and +1 endurance, which is great. You can buy this from traders pretty early on. Try the clothing shop in Diamond City so you can have it for the majority of the game. None of this temporary until you can get bullshit this time. The Silver Shroud hat will be used alongside this, and it adds +1 perception, which represents the preacher's intrapersonal development from the wide-eyed, naive boy from Boston into someone more alert and on edge. Gameplay function mechanics-wise though, it's also a small but helpful boost. You may also purchase the legendary lever-action rifle Old Reliable from the Far Harbor DLC. This fresh-looking young man of God may be inclined to turn the other cheek, but provoke him enough and you just know on sight he will smite your unholy ass. Now, consistent with this character, the preacher will choose companions who are flawed and hold the potential to be fixed. When in doubt, show them the way of God. You may try to fix Kate with her drug problem, something similar to what the preacher has experienced firsthand. It goes without saying though that moral companions are still great choices. Characters like Preston Garvey and Deacon, take your pick. This is a build where settlements are completely optional. The only framework we have is local leader, but it is fun to choose to live off the land and to preach to your settlers like the holy agrarian you are deep down inside, reveling in domestic bliss. Feel free to start a farm and herd your sheep as a watchful shepherd, both metaphorically and literally. And that concludes another FudgeMuppet Fallout 4 build. Tune in soon for another cleansing, cathartic, new year, new me, eating healthy and hitting the gym after work every day role-playing experience. Subscribe for more sensational builds and role-playing content, and in any case, check in with us between now and whenever for some other fun content. Thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it. My name's Michael, and I'll nerd out with you all again next time.